Bill, take it away. We're glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, everybody. So these are Logan's questions.
Those are the land use questions are from Logan. Logan had some questions about land use, and
Okay.
I just figured let's do that while we're here, and then we'll field other things as
All right.
field as in land use.
Well, land use is individual to each county. So each county has their own land use ordinance as to what qualifies for land use. I'm pretty familiar with Albemarle as far as other counties. I'm probably not as familiar, but basically, my advice always is to clients, which is to go talk to your talk to the tax office about land use and what may qualify and what doesn't. Like in Albemarle, you have to have 20 acres in order to have a forestry land use exemption. It can't be less than 20 acres. So I had a client once who had 21 acres. He decided to build a house. The county decided the house site was 2 acres, not 1 acre. He no longer qualified for land use. So I just tell what my clients when I get one, and we find out about land use when we get the title report back, because the title report gives us the status of taxes, and they'll say properties being taxed under land use. So what I usually do is at that point is if the client didn't know about it, and most of the time the realtors have let this information go on to the client. And a lot of them already know about land use, or at least to go inquire. But I always tell the client to go inquire about land use, to figure out what he needs to do to make sure he qualifies. I used to think that you almost had to qualify immediately when the new owner took over, but more and more I'm hearing back, and I've never really inquired myself, that the land use will continue through some period of time, and then the new owner just needs to go in and requalify. But the best advice is to before closing to get your client to talk to the tax office. Usually they have somebody who specializes in land use, and have them go in and find out exactly what they're going to need to do, when they're going to need to do it, to make sure they can continue to qualify. If you don't continue to qualify, then we deal with the nasty word called rollback taxes. The
So
contracts.
Bill, let me stop you for 1 second. And you may not know this, and I'll try to find the article. I think it was just yesterday, but they were talking about the land use. Interestingly enough, because I knew we were going to be talking about this today, and about how they're talking about changing some of the restrictions in Albemarle County they were talking about. And I guess, Bill, there's some 5 and 10 year type scenarios, and especially out in Batesville, they were using that one as an example that that some people may, because it doesn't abut or part of what would be considered farm or forestry, that they may end up losing their capability to qualify for that.
Yeah, I did not read that article, but it is specific to each locality as to what they allow to get taxed, reduced taxes under land use, and it's different all the time. I mean, I'm amazed from one county to the other. I will have thought. I know I dealt with one county once, and I think there was only like about 8 acres, and darn if it didn't qualify for land use. A couple of acres qualified because they had enough cattle on it. Another thing I've discovered, just to talk about land use, is sometimes you can stack parcels. So let's say some seller owns 3 parcels adjacent to each other, and they total enough that it gets under land use, but all of a sudden he sells one of the parcels, and that may no longer qualify for land use. So, it really is a minefield. And the problem is, if we don't get it right, it won't happen immediately, but 6 months later, somebody's going to get a call saying, I just got a tax bill for $4,000 for old taxes. What am I supposed to do with it? So land use is, important. The good news is most of the people I've dealt with, most realtors I'm dealing with seem to get it and their client gets it. And so I haven't had that call, what do I do about it, from one of my clients, fortunately.
Well, and again, one of the things that you want to do in the contract, and somebody like Lori, who's fairly new, you can go into our agent hub and go back to the AHA playlist and the whole contract. We went through it paragraph by paragraph over the last couple months. But the paragraph where it talks about taxes and it talks about rollback taxes, the best thing to do in that situation, if you're representing the buyer, is just to write in any rollback taxes are to be taken care of by the seller. And that way, when they do the search and they find out that it's out of use or whatever, and there's a $4,000 bill, that it's clear that the seller is responsible for that, in moving forward. And Bill, I know I'm kind of taking us out a little bit, but let me just do it for a minute in regards to title search. If they've put in seller to take care of any rollback taxes of any, and for some reason it gets missed, and they did get that $4,000 bill after they bought it, that's where the title insurance comes in to help the buyer fight that, correct?
Well, probably not, because the title company takes exception to rollback taxes.
Ah, okay.
One of the exceptions is the possibility of rollback taxes. So I don't think title insurance will help in that case. Doesn't the VAR contract require right before you fill in the, rollback taxes, if any, belongs to the seller? Doesn't above it talk about that the buyer agrees to apply for land use or something? It used to say something like that. Does it not
I don't think
anymore?
so.
Okay.
I don't see, I can go back and look, but I don't think that it says that.
Yeah, I think it's been taken out too. It used to require the buyer to apply for it. But I think that the reality is most buyers want to get it because they want to continue the reduced tax. So they'll go ahead and apply so they can continue that and not create the rollback.
Yeah, and that's the incentive, right? That's for a lot of people, that's why they're buying that piece of property, is to have that and not and get that benefit.
Exactly.
Bill, this is specifically somebody that I think it's in land use because I think it's on the GIS. I've looked at the tax years and I think that it's changed to land use forestry and it's 23 acres, but my buyer wants to do some clearing of some timber. And so I suddenly, when I was this came up and I went back to look at a past, it's already closed. You guys, it closed through Charlottesville settlement. I didn't really hear or get a disclosure from the listing agent that it was in that, but when I looked back after like a seminar on land use, I saw that it looked like it had changed last year. So I just don't know whether I should at least tell my clients, by the way, you're in forest land use, but I don't know if that was, Ashley did the closing. I don't know. I didn't see the title report. So it was like a conundrum. Like, I guess they shouldn't clear more than 3 acres, or do they know that? And just this sort of Pandora's box opened.
When I had some property once out in Free Union, and I know when we tried to when we qualified for land use on it, we had to have a forestry plan. But I think the county is sort of laxed up on that, and I'm not sure that's still required. We had to get a forester and come up with some kind of a plan for why we had, why we were qualified under, having trees. I guess, how long ago there's people buy the
September.
Oh, so it's still current. Well, I think what they should my advice to them would be to go in and talk to the county about, what they need to do to reapply for land use, so they can continue to get it. They may not want to. They may not want to volunteer their clearing the land, or don't call them until call them now before they clear the land.
That's what I'm saying. Suddenly that's the issue that I heard, but I think when they bought it, it was still in land. I mean, I don't think that it changes when they close it.
I don't think it does either, Logan. I used to think you had to qualify right away, but I think it lasts through at least the tax year, and then you've got to go in and requalify. The new owner does.
Mm-hmm.
And is
think
this
that's right.
something that the listing agent should have disclosed to me, or where am, as an agent, where am I finding this unless I'm going back and Logan Clearly help me with this?
Well,
unless we-
if you pull up the tax information from the county, it'll say it's under land use. It'll show you know, that the land is worth 100,000, but it's only being taxed at 20,000. So it'll be actually there on their records.
Okay. Thank you.
We had to do, I guess it was 2 years ago, we had to do our forestry plan for our property. We're right at 29 acres and we had to redo it. I believe it was every 5 years. It was right at the
5 years.
5-year mark. We had to redo it for Albemarle County. So,
And again, it may be different in Fluvanna County.
And that's something the listing agent or both agents should know.
Well, I think you representing the buyer, you want to know so you can advise your client that they need to go check into land use to make sure they can continue to qualify.
Got it.
But again, I think Michael's right. If you write in there that the seller is going to be responsible, then at least if it doesn't work, the seller's going to have to pay for it. And it can be expensive. Rollback, it goes back 5 years, I believe. And they not only figure out the tax that was deferred, but I think add interest to it.
Okay. So they pay for it even after the transaction's closed. Yep.
Well, they don't calculate the rollback until sometimes after the closing, and sometimes it can be months.
Got it.
So Logan, one just quick response to what you just said. Obviously, as a buyer agent, whatever we can do to help the client understand what they're in is certainly important. But as far as agency is concerned, we can only be held responsible for what we do know, not for what we should have known or could have known. And so in that scenario, you know, obviously you want to have all the information, but if somebody isn't giving you the information and it wasn't, you know, asked, then, you know, it's just one of those things. But I think in this situation, I think that the people are probably fine. But I think what Bill is advising is absolutely right. Before they do anything, make sure that they're on solid ground, solid land, in the way that they use it. Yeah.
Who is the closer over at CSC? I'll make sure they know about land use.
Ashley.
All right.
And I didn't get notified that it was in the title search or anything. So, you know, this just sort of came up in something and I went back and I said, I wonder if that affected my transaction. And I went in and I had seen that it was just, it appears on the GIS to have shifted just in the last year.
Michael's right though, a little bit. You don't want to, the more you know, and you end up having to disclose or be involved, you know, the more liability you take on.
So do I just stay silent? But Bill, do I stay?
No, I think land use is pretty easy to pass it off to the buyer to go deal with it. I think that's a good one. I'll give you a great example. None of y'all have ever done this, but if you did, you'd be shocked. When people go in and get a house, they apply for a building permit and they apply for a septic permit if it's on, you know, not on public sewer. And they apply for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And 20 years later, they've added onto the basement and built another bedroom and another bathroom. And, you know, now you go in to do the listing and you discover it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. And that's where you list it. No one ever goes and checks the public records to find out that it probably doesn't have a septic for that. So every now and then that comes back to bite somebody. Mm-hmm. Usually it's new construction. So if you're, what I do in my practice, if it's new construction, we're trying to look at the, you know, we give the client a copy of the septic permit that says 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. We have no clue how it was sold, how it was listed, because all we get is a contract. You know, we're selling, you know, we're buying this new house. But that's, you know, that's an interesting dilemma. I think you guys don't have any liability for that because what we're doing, you know, hopefully is giving the permit out at close and giving them a copy of all the CO and the permits. So it's up to the buyer to tell me, wait a minute, I thought I was buying a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house.
And I will tell you,
Somebody-
folks, that there are a lot of agents out there that handle that the wrong way in the MLS because legally it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house.
Right.
So you really shouldn't be marketing as a 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom house because you are misrepresenting the property as it relates to the loan. And interestingly enough, I just had this happen last week, and Jay and I talked about it, and Jay said that it doesn't have to technically impact the appraisal, but I wouldn't depend on it, because if I'm an appraiser and it's only a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house as far as the septic field's concerned, and I have a hard time attaching value from a 4-bedroom, 3-bath. And so what you can do is you can, you got to look in the agent remarks, because if somebody puts 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, make sure you're always looking at agent remarks, because sometimes they'll say septic field only perks for 3, or 2, or whatever the case may be. And then you got to go and get it recertified. And you would want to make that as part of your contract, that that a company could come out and make sure that it could be used for a 4-bedroom. But a lot of agents, they just go ahead willy-nilly put in 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, because that's like Bill said, hopefully they don't know, because then that's knowingly misrepresenting. But a lot of them don't know. The person says it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath. They may not tell them that they did the renovation. And here's another place we can go, Bill, from here, is somebody does that renovation but doesn't pull permits.
Oh, yeah.
Talk a little bit about that from a standpoint of,
Yeah, well, I mean, that happens all the time. And again, public records, sometimes if it was done 15 years ago, are hard to come by. Or the septic was 30 years old. So, trying to get those records and figure out if there was a CO issued for an addition, because a homeowner is allowed to do some work himself without getting a building permit. If he hires a plumber or an electrician, somebody who you do need a permit for, then they're supposed to go in and get inspections. But you'd be amazed at the number of times it hadn't. I had a house once, and they had finished the upstairs. It was kind of not a loft area, but one of those roof, the roof, and it was a extra room, whatever they call those rooms upstairs. And no permit had been pulled, and somehow we discovered it. And my poor seller had to go in and tear down sheetrock and get inspectors in. And it was about $4,000 later, we were able to sell the house, because he hadn't pulled a permit and somebody was asking the right questions. But again, how do we know? Now, with the 3-bedroom, this 3-bedroom issue versus 4 bedrooms, all that means septic wise, if it's a 3-bedroom house, the septic is big enough for 6 people. So you can have a 4-bedroom house, but you can only, according to the septic permit, have 6 people living in it. So that's why it doesn't become a problem many times, because we don't see those 8-member families anymore.
So here's a question. Hang on a second, Barb. Here's a question in regards to please, Barb, go right ahead.
Okay. So if someone's going to be building out in the country, but maybe eventually adding on an extra bedroom or 2, they should request a larger septic
Yeah,
system.
absolutely.
From the get-go.
But if you're getting from one of these, builders who are building specs, or not pre-sales, they're usually building 3-bedroom, getting permits for 3 bedrooms, and not thinking ahead that they should be doing a 4-bedroom, because somebody's going to finish the basement.
Yeah.
So here's where I want to go. Thank you, Barb. That's a great question. So going back to somebody not pulling permits, and they do a family room, they finish the basement, right? And they get that done, and Lord willing, they got it done by a licensed electrician and plumber and that kind of thing. But let's just say the person decided to do it on their own. I'm kind of asking this for Ryan's benefit, although it's a little bit different. They did it on their own, and when you do the home inspection, you realize that it's an older home, so some things are grandfathered, right? Because they were built to code at the time that the house was built.
Right.
But now they've done this, renovation in the basement at a new time. So I would think that that has to be up to the new code, right? So you find out that it wasn't. One, I mean, obviously in a home inspection, you can put that as part of your HRCA that you want to have somebody come in and make sure everything has been done properly. But let's just say for the sake of discussion, they don't. And they end up having a fire in the basement. And the insurance company looks at it. I know I'm worst case scenario here, but they have a fire in the basement and the insurance company says, wait, this thing was wired incorrectly, pre-existing condition. Is that something that the insurance company could say that they don't want to cover?
I do not know the answer to that. I would think not. I don't think the insurance company can say that you had faulty wiring. That would the same thing as saying, well, you knew there was a light switch that you kept turning off and on, and it would delay, causing the light to go on, and you should have fixed it. That caused the fire. We're not going to cover you. I don't think that's the case. I do know on insurance, I've had this happen to a client. They had a townhome. They were renting it. They got an insurance policy, which is called a fire policy. When you're not living in it, it insures almost all the same risk. It just doesn't insure contents. It's a fire policy when you're on the property and someone's renting it. Then they moved into it, and all of a sudden now they're living in it and they're renting out a bedroom. But they never changed their policy from a fire to a homeowner's. Now, what's interesting, a homeowner's policy is cheaper than a fire policy because of the different risk. Well, they didn't change to the homeowner's policy. There was a fire, the whole place was destroyed, and the insurance company basically covered most of the damage, but they argued that you had the wrong policy, so they wouldn't cover any of the contents. So anyway, that's my insurance story.
Awesome.
Anybody
Other
else?
questions you guys have?
I have a few things just that my staff, they keep sending me stuff that we need to. We've been really negligent in sending out Tucker's tips just because it's COVID and things are just not normal. And I'm guessing it'll stay this way for a while. So these are some things that have come up in the last couple of months that they've asked me to do a tip on. One is, if you know your client, buyer or seller, is probably going to be using a power of attorney or not going to be present for closing, probably pass that on to the settlement agent. You'll be amazed at the number of times that it gets slipped up, and all of a sudden we're closing a week from Friday, and the people are in California, or they need a power of attorney that the bank has to approve because the wife's not coming to closing. So if you have information that's like that, that's not on the contract, pass that on so that everybody's aware of the problem and we can deal with it accordingly. Another issue that's come up a couple of times in my practice is if the property is a rental, and so there's a lease in there, and lease is either going to be assigned or terminated or whatever. The contract is really good. The contract provides if there's a lease, it'll be assigned and the rents will be prorated, et cetera, et cetera. Pass that information on if it's a rental, whether you're on the buyer or the seller side, so that the settlement agent knows to deal with that and deal with prorations. Again, that's a common problem we run into, that all of a sudden we're 3 days before closing and, hey, have you gotten information on the lease? The client asked. And it's the first time we've heard about it, because that's usually not in the contract in anywhere specifically, because it's covered in the boilerplate language. And then another one, which has always been a problem, let me see my notes, is the if if you're listing the property, I think it's more on the listing side, although the buying side, you maybe would know this. If there are two parcels that are being conveyed, or more than one parcel being conveyed, a lot of times the contract may not have both parcels in it. It may just have a street address. You gotta put both parcels down. It happens pretty regularly, maybe once every 6 weeks, where we'll do a title search on a piece of property that we think is the property that's being conveyed, and we'll get a week before closing and find out, hey, what about the little strip of land next to us? That hasn't been included. Because what happens is a street address a lot of times won't include that second parcel. What we do when we get a title order is we'll go on into the tax records and try to make sure it matches up. And a lot of times we'll catch the fact that there's this particular seller owns an adjacent parcel. So a lot of that times we'll catch that early on and get that corrected. But occasionally it'll slip through the cracks and we'll get to closing, or even I've had several post-closing where the seller, a year after closing, gets a tax bill for this little strip of land adjacent that was never conveyed because nobody mentioned it. Oh, by the way, we're selling, all the land we have, which happens to include this extra 4,000 square foot, parcel next to us.
I had that happen, only it wasn't just a little strip. It was half of the, we didn't know, and the selling agent didn't let us know that there were 2 lots. The title company didn't catch it. Their garage, it was just this really nice piece of property, little house, and then a nice garage adjoining it. That garage was on a section, and we didn't realize it was separate. And about 5 years later, she got a tax bill, and I think the title company went to bat for us because it was their slip up too. And oh my gosh, so she had owed a whole bunch, but they got it worked out.
So this is a great example because this just happened this past week. So I want you to understand that these are practical pieces of advice because we listed a property that had a second parcel and the agent reached out to me and said, what do I do? And I'm pretty sure, Bill, I had them reach out to you. But basically, because the person wants to sell them both as part of the transaction. And I said, look, you can put it in the MLS and do this, but in the agent remarks, you want to have a second lot to be sold as part of the price so that when the contract gets written, it's not only got the legal description for the piece of land that the lot is on, the piece of land that the house is on, but it also has a legal description for this second parcel so that the closing company knows that they've got to prepare. I guess, Bill, tell me, technically, I obviously didn't get into the giving legal advice, but I guess what happens is you all prepared 2 deeds, right? That they convey over in that situation to the buyer, right? Because it wasn't that they were going to assemble it before they bought it. They were buying both lots.
Well, it can be one deed where you're conveying 2 parcels.
Oh, okay.
So you can do that all in one deed. It's just that we need to know that there's that second parcel involved so that the legal description, the title work, if you're doing a survey, the survey is surveying both lots. In the case of Barb's situation, if she had gotten a survey, they would have discovered that the garage is over the line, and then somebody would have said, wait, time out. What about this garage? And then we would have discovered we need the second lot. And so that brings me to what I'll always preach as a lawyer and as a Tucker's tip, the importance of physical surveys. I know that they're not required. The lender doesn't require them. The lender will get from every title company a title coverage for matters that would be shown by a survey. So the lender is protected if the survey shows a problem. And the reason, and when I'm talking about a problem, let's say that the fence is over the property line or inside the property line, or the driveway is not on the property, or the neighbor's driveway is on the property. The lender, or that the house is instead of being 10 feet off the line is only 8 feet off the line. The lender doesn't care about that because they're protected. You know, their loan is protected. There's not going to be a loss of title for that. But the owner may care about that because when they get ready to sell it and the next buyer does a survey and finds that problem, then that seller, now the buyer today, the seller 10 years from now he's got to deal with the problem because he didn't get a survey to discover that the driveway was over the line. So we preach surveys all the time. Every week I have a new survey problem to deal with. So it's not like I'm saying it's very rare. I mean, if nothing else, don't you want to know where everything is on your property? Don't you want to know exactly where the house is and where the boundary lines are? Fences are never, ever, well, I should say never, very rarely are they on the boundary line. But everybody thinks that's the boundary of the property.
And I'll give you another example where this was a few years ago, but we sold a piece of property and the well was on somebody else's house, on somebody else's lot. So the house literally didn't have a well. It was drawing from, it had a well, but it was drawing on somebody else's property, and it created a major issue. And if the survey had been done, obviously that would have shown up and it could have gotten resolved. And it, you know, we almost had to go to court over it. We got it resolved, but and it wasn't anything that we did wrong because we didn't know, and the seller didn't know. It was a piece of property that I think at some point, you know, a house was built, whatever, and then they sold, you know, some of the property, and it just turned out that they sold the well. You know, because the boundary line was you know the well was on the other side of what was supposed to be still theirs. So yeah, really important.
Yeah, so I mean, and again, the lender doesn't require it. It's an option for the buyer to get it. As a practice, my firm will try to find a prior physical survey, and a physical survey is different than the boundary survey. The boundary survey just shows the plat, shows the boundary lines. The physical survey shows the boundary lines, but everything inside or over the boundary lines. So that you're like a bird, or now I'd say a drone looking down on the property, and it shows the outline of everything that's there in 2 dimensions. That's what a physical survey does. And I think they're really important. So if you're doing on the listing side, again, this is what I always advise, ask the seller if they have a copy of a physical survey. Most of the time they have a plat, they don't have a physical survey. If they do have a physical survey, provide it to the other side. It'll help out. Also, ask them if they have a title insurance policy on this, on the listing side, and provide that to the other side. I'm amazed the number of times that a seller has a title insurance policy that says the title is good, and the property gets sold, the new attorney for the buyer or settlement company does a title search. They don't find the policy that the seller had that was written 10 years ago. So they do a 40 or 60-year title search, and they find a title problem. Now, that's probably a good thing to find it, but a lot of title problems ought to just continue to be buried because they don't become problems until they never come and see, they never see the light of day. The old unreleased deed of trust that we know is paid off. There are lots of those out there that are still not released, but if the title company doesn't find them, we don't deal with them. And because they're paid off, there's no foreclosure. So there's no harm. There's no harm, no foul. But if you at the listing agent happen to have an owner's policy that you give to the buyer's agent, and they pass that on to the attorney doing the closing, we're not going to go do a 40-year title search. We're going to probably rely on that owner's policy and just search the title forward. And so that old unreleased deed of trust from 20 years ago from a bank that's long out of existence doesn't become a problem. So as a listing side, those are good things to do. On the buying side, you definitely want you don't want to, I had another agent do this the other day. The agent said to their client, I don't think you need owner's title insurance. So the buyer said, I'm not going to get it. I said, okay, I guess you're going to rely on the agent for coverage for that advice. Same thing on surveys. Don't as a agent say, I don't think you need a survey. Just say, talk to your attorney, talk to your settlement agent.
So a couple of things we've learned this week is, one, do not do the buyer net sheet, because all the different numbers that go in there, Katie and Jay certainly made that very clear on Tuesday. And if you missed that, I'd go back and watch it. And we now have a Excel spreadsheet so that you can do the seller net sheet, because it's much easier to put those numbers in. So don't do that. And then two, get them to sign in blood if they don't want a home inspection. Get them to sign in blood that they don't want a home warranty. Get them to sign in blood that they don't want a survey. Get them to sign in blood that they don't want title insurance. Because when they come back to you with a problem, you want to be able to say, well, here in my notes on November 12th, we talked about this and you said you didn't need it. And I told you that I thought you might want to talk to your attorney and get that decided. So those are the kind of ways that we protect ourselves from after the fact stuff.
We in our practice, we have forms that when they don't want owner's title insurance, there's a place they sign and check that they don't want it. In my practice, I'd say 98% of buyers get owner title insurance. A lot of them get the enhanced coverage. Same thing for surveys. Our survey letter is, where they say they don't want a survey. We kind of go through and say, that they should get a survey. And we actually do the survey waiver up front at the beginning of the closing, because that's going to take a while to get. And so we want to know up front if we're going to need to order a survey or not. So we have them sign off that they don't want it. And we kind of say in that letter, at least they used to say that. I think they edited it. I used to say, you're a stupid idiot for not wanting owner's title insurance and not wanting a survey, and don't ever come to me because you have a problem. But I think they edited that, and it doesn't quite say that anymore. But that's what it should say.
I just had my first out of a lot of transactions in Illinois and here. I never had anyone not get title insurance until the one that closed a month ago. And when they first signed the forms that we have them sign of where they want to have settlement and you want title insurance, lenders and homeowners and enhanced, they signed that. But then when they got the email from Charlottesville Settlement introducing themselves, and he very emphatically said, I do not want title insurance. And I called him and I said, are you sure? I've never had anybody not. No, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So I included all of that in the file.
You can lead them to the water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah.
My favorite, but by this week's story about somebody who thinks they know more than they do. The gentleman's from out of state. He's buying for cash. There's a survey that's about 30 years old. It doesn't show but about half the improvements on the property. And he decided he didn't want a survey, but he did want to know where the creek was going through his property, but he didn't want to pay for a survey. So the surveying companies that I sent him to said, we're not going to come in. If we're going to come in, we're going to do the survey right. We're just not going to come in and do your corners unless you want us to mark your corners, and then that costs almost as much as a survey. So he didn't want that. But then my favorite on title insurance, he said, well, the seller is giving me a general warranty deed. So the seller is telling me the title is good. So why do I need title insurance? Because the seller is warranting title is good. And I said to him, well, because what happens if the seller is no longer around? The seller is passed away. The seller has moved to Montana and we can't find him. And it's 15 years from now when you're selling the property and you're going to rely on this title problem that the seller's going to clear it up, where if you have owner's title insurance, it's the title company's problem. But he knew better, and so he doesn't want title insurance because he's getting a general warranty deed. So I've got the form for him to sign.
Well, and then the other thing too, and right now it's not a problem, but if let's just say it was this all happened back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, there were closing companies. Most of you weren't in the business at that point, but maybe only Dan. Barb is in the business, but in Illinois, but there are closing companies that aren't in existence anymore. And so you go back to that closing company to try to get this resolved, and they're out of business. And maybe the deed never got, what do they call that? After the fact, deed of satisfaction never got recorded. I mean, so it's another reason why you got to, be very careful of these things. And that's something that, with what Bill just talked about with somebody who wants general warranty. Well, that's great. You got a general warranty deed, but at some point, one of these closing companies who did the search may not be around anymore to be able to certify what they did. And you're the one who's going to be chasing that and paying for it.
Yep. If I had one last thing, I just noticed one of my paralegals said, and I don't specifically know what happened in this case, but if you're in an HOA and you're representing, if you're representing the seller, you all know to go get the packet and do all that, and that's great. My advice on packets is get them early. Don't wait for after the inspection or after loan approval, because then that gives the buyer another get out of jail card. So you want to get the 3 days over with as soon as you can. But on the buyer's side, apparently in this one case, the buyer didn't do anything with talking to the HOA, and somehow the HOA never figured out that the buyer was now on this property. And so about 2 years later, there are all these delinquent dues that have accrued. So probably as the selling agent, advise, at least say to your people, hey, you need to contact the HOA and give them your contact information so they'll know where to send the bills. I don't know what the instance was, but apparently it was enough of a problem that one of my paralegals wrote me about it and said that that's something you may want to do a Tucker's tip on.
Yeah. Dan Conquest, anything you got, man, being the veteran in the room?
Okay, I have unmuted. Good morning. Noteworthy items covered without question. Experiences that I've had a few of for sure. Septic systems, a big deal in my view, and would always encourage any agent to get in writing, if not, if you can't convince your client as a buyer rep to have the septic system inspected, because there are problems that come up very, very often. Health department oftentimes has the information you're looking for preliminaries. That doesn't mean it's fully accurate as such, but it's important to go check in with the health department also for permits relative to well, as well as, no pun intended, as well as for the septic system. And in matters of permitting on your residence for work done, I don't know the answer. Of course, it could vary from insurance company to insurance company relative to getting permits for work done in your house. I was told by someone, and Michael's heard me tell this story before, I was told by someone in the assessor's office, and so I've passed this along to clients, that they had work done. There was a fire that took place on the property related to poor workmanship and not being inspected, let alone done by a qualified person. And their understanding was, in fact, that the insurance company refused to make payment for damages due to the neglect and the improper work performance.
Wow. So again,
Good information all the way around. Thank you.
Yeah, and Dan, just an add on, don't forget, it's made, Virginia Realtors have made it a little bit easier because, the septic is no longer in the contract. It used to be well and septic paragraph. And as of the most recent update, the septic's not included. So there's a new addendum that's in the Virginia Realtor forms. And
Yeah.
it clearly outlines what Dan just said, that the buyer has the right to a full inspection, distribution box, those kinds of things. And so it has taken away an area that was, it was misconstrued. I mean, because well and septic was both there, and like Dan said, health department comes out, or somebody comes out and does a walk and sniff test and said, yeah, septic field's working. But and it may be working right then, but the distribution box may be being crushed by roots, and any time now it's going to give out. And so the new addendum, puts the buyer, is able to communicate the buyer's wishes to the seller in the contract, including who's going to pay for it, and that the property will be put back in the condition it was found. Because for those of you who don't know, the septic, you got to dig it up. You got to dig it up, and so you can look at the thing, and so you got to have somebody who knows what they're doing, so that they can replace the sod back down and make it look as much like it was when before they dealt with it. And of course, right now with all this rain, it wouldn't be hard to dig it up, put it back down, and stomp on it a little bit, and it grow back just real quick. But in the middle of summer, that might be different. So just keep that in mind. There's that new septic addendum that we need to include in the contract.
So Michael, is that, just to be clear, because I am so new, don't just rely on the home inspector. We should have a second inspector to evaluate, or you have like the home inspector actually digging up the I've only had one
No.
have the
The
septic.
home inspector isn't going to do this septic.
No,
That's a
So have-
separate inspection.
have a separate person go out.
So you would
Each
have
time.
somebody like Interstate go out and do that. Remember, in the home inspection contingency, it talks about it's not just a home inspector. You can have whoever you want out in that property during that time period to do things. But what you're going to have with that new septic addendum is that's going to be contingent on the same. You're going to have a time period to have that done. And it's not a bad idea. And if you're a listing agent, I try to encourage you to get all those things ending on the same day. Home inspection, septic inspection, those kinds of things, so that you don't have people having different times to have an opportunity to get out of the deal. Same thing with the homeowner's documents or the condominium documents, get those ordered when you list the property. So as soon as you get a ratified contract, you're handing those to Russell, and Russell's getting to the buyer, and they have 3 days versus ordering them once you get a contract. And now that's an escape clause for any buyer. So I want to have that homeowners and condominium documents taken care of before the home inspection time period's even up. And if there is a septic, I want to put the septic in that same time period, so my seller knows, okay, this is the date, hopefully, that we've got everything sort of resolved. We may still have an appraisal situation or the finance contingency, because it's usually 30 days. But those other easy out scenarios, I want to get those cleaned up as quick as I can in the contract.
If you're having that more invasive septic inspection done where they're digging up the distribution box, and I know some of them will run cameras down the pipes, down the pipes and such, you may want to also include, maybe it's already in the boilerplate, that as long as they've got it all exposed, get it pumped at that same time. That way your new buyer's starting over because it's amazed the number of times people forget to go check their septic, and I'm one of them, getting it, pumped regularly.
Yeah.
Interjecting, if I may, any qualified, I'll use that word, septic installer or pumping company, whatever, that's going to do the work for you is going to start with the tank to begin with, because that tells a whole lot of what the world is going to be like, what's been flushed down the toilet, what the condition of the tank is the first place to start. Then you go to the distribution box and may go out to the drain field, but not so often. And that's going to be built into their whole cost factor when they quote that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the other thing I would just remind everybody is that as of July 1st, the inspector now has to be certified in a new way in regards to the septic inspection. And that caught some people off guard, the people that we normally would use. Initially, they didn't realize how much time it was going to take to get their people certified. But I think enough time's gone by that the normal, the folks that you would usually call are all certified. I know Interstate is, Cavalier Septic, Roto-Rooter, there's a fourth one I can't remember right now, but anyway, whereas before when you first, at that time period when it switched, we had some problems because some of the folks couldn't do it because they weren't, they didn't realize it was going to take as much time to get certified in the way that the state had mandated. All right. Well, it's 11 o'clock. Bill, thank you so much for your time. And let me just say publicly again, I so much appreciate your and Katie's just involvement with us. It's a huge thing for us in regards to our partnership that we've got you guys on our side and that we can reach out to you and, you know, that you're really responsive. I know you helped out with Ryan with the closing that he's got tomorrow in regards to getting that squared away for a seller. And, you know, Katie was on Tuesday with the CellNet and she's always ready to help in whatever way we can. I just think it's a huge thing that we have that. And so thank you very much for what you do.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a great day.
Mhm.
You
Thanks.
too.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.